Well, hello and welcome to video number 4. This video is going to be all about how to design and create the red line. The red line, of course, is the main outside line that's going to have an incline and a decline into multiple mountain areas. So it's a pretty neat layout, but there's a lot of detail to it. One of the things that we have to do is, for example, I've already laid down the track and I've traced it with appropriately so red pencil, and so I've got that tracing already laid out, so I'll be ready to lay down the risers. But the red line is going to go all the way around on the outside. It's going to start to incline here. It's going to continue to incline around the curve, and by the time it gets over here, this is the waterfall feature that I'm going to be making. It's going to be a good 8 inches tall. So it's going to be a really high mountain scene, which will be really neat. I'm going to do a waterfall scene right here, and then the red line is going to continue all the way around in the corner. In this corner, I hope to have a wood trestle on the curve, which will be really neat for a mountain scene. And to give you an idea of how these 3 lines will look together, here you see at the very bottom, that's the black line. That's about a 1/2 inch riser. Then above that you have the green line, and that's 4 inches up on risers. And then above that, you're going to have the red line. It'll be at least a total of 8 inches tall, probably a little bit more by the time I'm done. So there's going to be these 3 lines around the whole layout. It's going to be a really neat looking scene, I think, with all the mountains and everything. But I have some very special problems to work out. Problem number 1 is starting right about here. The red line has to start with an incline. And so I'm going to be doing inclines, and then of course at some point, if you're doing inclines, you have to do declines. So probably starting right about here, I'll have to do a decline and bring it back down into the valley again. Now, another problem I have is before I can even start thinking about laying the track and the risers and everything for the red line and building that up, I have to do some mountain work on these areas, because the red line will be so tall, it will be very difficult for me to reach over it to create the mountain scenes. So I'm going to make the mountain scenes first around the green line and the black line to save me all that reaching, make it a lot easier to access. So I'm actually going to have to do that first, and the way I'm going to do that is I'll be using these products. I'm going to be using the Woodland Scenics plaster cloth. I'll be using just crumpled up pieces of newspaper, actually. When you look at some of these mountains I've already created, that's exactly what these are. These are pieces of newspaper that I wadded up. I put the plaster cloth over it first. That's what it looks like with just the plaster cloth. And then I use the hydrocol plaster and go over it with a brush, and that's what gives it its final look. Of course, now you've got all that texturing and everything, and once you start painting it and putting down different colors and everything, you're going to have yourself some pretty neat looking mountains. So that's the work that's ahead of me first, and I'll be giving you a demonstration on exactly how that's done in just a moment. So you probably remember from our previous video, we said when we're using the plaster cloth, we're going to cover up the tracks. I'm just using painter's tape to cover the tracks, but we want to make sure we don't get any plaster on them. And then you're going to do a section at a time on these mountains, so you're going to cut different sizes of plaster cloth based on the area that you're covering. And remember, this stuff sets pretty quickly, so you want to do this in small sections, like maybe 3-4 foot sections at a time is generally enough. And just like we did before, you just put the plaster cloth in the water for a moment and then take it out, bumpy side up, lay it down and smooth it out with your hands. The whole process goes pretty quickly once you get started. If you have everything prepared in advance, you can crank right through a section in no time at all. And it is during this part that you're actually sculpting the mountain, so to speak, where you're getting that plaster cloth on the paper and sculpting it to shape however you want it to look, which is the creative part in all of this. One special project I've got is getting underneath all these tunnels that I'm building. This is kind of a tough thing to do, so I have to take extra time and extra care getting the sidewalls within the tunnels, around the tunnels, under the tunnels. There are a lot of detail work to do here. And we're just putting in the last piece now along the side track. We should have this one finished up. So next what we have to do is we're going to add the hydrocol and put that over the plastic cloth after it's dried. And typically you'll use 2 parts of plaster to 1 part water, but for what I'm using the plaster for, covering over the plaster cloth, I'm going to go 50-50. So it's 1 part of water and 1 part of mix. You just mix up the hydrocol with the water in a container. Let it set for about 2 minutes and then come back and give it another good stir. Then allow it to set for another 2 minutes and then it's ready to use. And we'll just take it over to the part that we want to cover on the plaster cloth. I'll be using like a regular little paintbrush, and you just brush it right over the plaster cloth. And you can see this starts to give that mountain shape a real definition. It's incredible how it turns out because it all sounds so simple with wads of paper and plaster cloth and all of that, but once you start putting it all together, as you can see, it really looks pretty realistic. Well, I really have my work cut out for me. I have a lot to do here, and you're about to see all the different sections that I've worked through in getting this mountain work completed for the red line prep.